Okay, it's up.
We are now live and we are recording. We'll give a couple minutes and then we can proceed.
Okay, it's up.
We are now live and we are recording. We'll give a couple minutes and then we can proceed.
We just lost your good voice, Brian.
So I'm with Chris now. I have a face for radio and a voice for nothing.
Brian, I think Mayor Copeland's trying to tell you he's still muted.
Okay.
We just lost your good voice, Brian.
And we're also hearing everything on a delay. So if somebody
Chris now, I have a face for radio and a voice for nothing.
is everybody else hearing the delay?
Yeah, Brian's delayed a lot. And I don't see the meeting on Facebook yet.
I think somebody has it on speaker.
Hey, Regina, I can't seem to unmute Warren.
Hearing the delay.
I can't get him unmuted
Brian's
either.
delayed a lot.
I'm gonna unmute
And I don't see the
all.
meeting on Facebook yet. It's not on yet.
Warren's the only one I
Somebody
cannot.
has it on speaker.
There we go. Warren's
You can hear me
unmuted.
now?
Yes, we can hear you, Warren.
Okay. Jill is for me, of
Can't
course.
get him unmuted either. I got him. He's good. I'm gonna unmute all.
It's not on yet.
Warren's the only one I cannot. There we go.
Can
Warren's
you hear me
unmuted.
now?
Yes, we can hear you, Warren.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jill just sent
somebody-
me up.
I got him.
Somebody have YouTube running in the background?
Somebody
Yeah, if you have the live feed running in the background, you need to turn it off because it is on a 15-second delay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Warren.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jill just sent me up.
I got him.
Somebody have YouTube running in the background?
Yeah, if you have the live feed running in the background, you need to turn it off because it is on a 15. Okay, if Val would like to unshare her screen, and then we can proceed with the meeting. I think we're good now, Warren.
Okay. Ready to start?
Yep.
Okay, the city commission meeting is called to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Here.
Dr. Estrad,
Here.
Mr. O'Neill,
Here.
Mr. Rue,
Here.
Mr. Copeland.
Here. Join me in the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Our God, we're grateful for this opportunity to represent the people of Springfield in this very strange situation we find ourselves in. Help us to do it well and help us to make the decisions that are needed for our community with concern for all of our citizens. In your name we pray, amen.
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 And flag is over here, so I'm going to pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So
So
moved.
moved. A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estrad,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Clerk will proceed with first readings by title only.
Consenting to the performance of bridge maintenance and rehabilitation on structure file number 1205463 within the city of Springfield by the Ohio Department of Transportation, identified as State Route 72, and further identified by PID number 108063, providing for the maintenance of the right-of-way and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements with the Director of Transportation of the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project. Authorizing the city manager to enter into an LPA federal local LET project agreement number 37472 between the city and the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide the city with eligible costs of up to a maximum sum of $77,000 for the North Burnett Columbus project, PID number 110976, and authorizing the city manager, law director, and finance director to do all things they deem necessary to implement said agreement. Consenting to the painting of the structural steel on various bridges throughout the district in Clark and Montgomery counties to include structure file number 1202944 and structure file number 1202855 within the city of Springfield by the Ohio Department of Transportation, identified by PID number 105404, providing for the maintenance of the right-of-way and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements with the Director of Transportation of the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project. Authorizing the law director to approve and settle a claim with Ohio Edison Company for the expense incurred as a result of damage that occurred to underground facilities near the intersection of High and Center Streets on or about December 13th, 2019, and authorizing the Director of Finance to make payment to Ohio Edison Company in the amount of $1,248.45 as full settlement as and for said damages. Authorizing the law director to approve and settle a claim with Mary Shropshire for the expense incurred as a result of damage that occurred on her property located at 515 East Harrison Street on or about January 4th, 2020, and authorizing the Director of Finance to make payment to Mary Shropshire in the amount of $1,380 as full settlement as and for said damages.
Are there any questions or comments on first readings? If not, the clerk will proceed with second readings.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for demolition services with Tony Smith, doing business as Tony Smith Wrecking and Trucking, for an amount not to exceed $600,000.
So
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrada,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an LPA federal local LET project agreement number 33222 between the city and Ohio Department of Transportation to provide the city with eligible costs of up to a maximum sum of $1,544,209.40 for the Yellow Spring Street reconstruction, phase 2, PID number 109607. Authorizing the city manager, law director, and finance director to do all things they deem necessary to implement said agreement, and authorizing an expenditure up to $386,052.35 to be used as matching funds in connection with the agreement to be entered into with the Ohio Department of Transportation.
Move to adopt.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, just for those citizens that were not listening a couple of weeks ago, I would ask that our city manager talk about this project, what part of Yellow Springs and what timeline we're looking at.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'll actually ask Chris Moore to give an update on the project.
Thank you.
This project is going to happen in two phases. One phase would go from Main Street to Pleasant, and that should be bid during the summer of 2022. And the second phase would go from Pleasant Street down to Grand Avenue, and that phase would be bid in the summer of 2023. All of these phases are under design right now.
Okay, and how much is this costing the city again?
As things stand right now, it would be $386,000 for the city's portion.
Thank you, Chris. Great job.
Anyone else? Clerk, I have call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
consenting to the microsurface of the existing pavement on Interstate 70 in Clark County from State Route 40 to just west of Selma Road, including a portion within the city of Springfield by the Ohio Department of Transportation, identified as 70-14, and further identified as PID number 109790, providing for the maintenance of the right-of-way and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements with the Director of Transportation of the state of Ohio necessary to complete the project.
So moved.
second,
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
so again, I know we had this last week, but I think our city manager said there is no cost to the city of Springfield. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is an ODOT project. The reason why we have this on the agenda is it's participatory language that we have to enter into agreement on because it is adjacent or touches city limits.
Thank you.
So this is the work that's already underway on 70.
This is actually a micro resurfacing project, so it's actually separate from the lane widening project that's going on right now by 72 out to Route 68. This is going in and basically doing what we refer to as a shave and pave of the existing highway section.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming purchases and the obtaining of services for the city and providing for payments therefore and declaring an emergency therein.
So
move to
moved.
adopt.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Providing for supplemental appropriations within various funds and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved.
second,
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
If Brian or Mark could explain what we're doing here, I think it would be good for the public to know what we're involved in with this ordinance.
Sure, I'd be happy to explain that, Commissioner. There are 3 items that we are asking for additional appropriations in a couple of different funds. The first one is a small amount of additional interest that has accrued in the Tuttle Road TIF project fund. And in order to pay that out, we need some additional appropriations there. That's a result of the project taking maybe just a little bit longer or than we had anticipated to pay out. But there's some interest flowing into that fund that we need appropriations in order to pay that out. In addition, the large item on supplemental appropriations this time is a $350,000 request for appropriations related to the parking garage. You might recall the contract that was signed with the public not too long ago. We will be working with them over the course of the next year. This contract runs from April 1 to May 31st of next year. And we are appropriating a certain amount of asking for appropriations for a certain amount of funds to be able to operate the parking garage. We hope that we will not use the entire $350,000 at this point in time, but we're being conservative with what we're asking for. Obviously, the expenses we incur will be dependent upon the amount of operations in this and the scale of that as we go forward in this kind of uncertain time. And then the last one we're asking for is some additional money in central stores to be able to purchase some sanitation supplies related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Very good. Thank you, Mark.
So what now is our time for the opening of the garage?
We are working, so they submitted their letter of substantial completion last Friday. They are finalizing some punch list items so that they can receive a certificate of occupancy for the structure itself. They anticipate that they will have those items done by the end of this week. We are on a call with our operations manager, Republic, tomorrow to discuss with them a strategy on opening the garage, using their expertise again in this current situation that we're facing, not just here in our community, but across the state and the country. And so you kind of leaning on them for some expertise on how they would roll out the opening of the garage. So we should have more information here soon about when the official opening date will be.
Okay, anybody else?
I just have one question. We're talking about opening date, but does that mean people can use the garage at this time, Brian?
No, the garage is currently not open as they, again, continue to finish up the punch list items. And they have not received a certificate of occupancy yet from our building department. Once they have those items cleared up, we'll be able to establish what a true opening date is for the garage where people can start utilizing it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
confirming and approving change order number 2 to the contract between the city and Associated Excavating Incorporated for the Northern Heights Water and Sewer Improvements Project to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $5,462 for a total amount not to exceed $1,048,400.25, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 2 and declaring an emergency therein.
move to
Move to
adopt,
adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Strasser Construction Incorporated for the Trail Maintenance Phase 2 project, PID number 109480, for an amount not to exceed $171,944.60, and declaring an emergency therein.
Move
move
to
to
adopt.
adopt, second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes.
Where's this, Brian?
Yeah, so essentially this is the entire trail section that the city currently operates, maintains through National Trail Parks and Recreation District. The only section that will not be included is the new section of the Little Miami Trail that was just completed a couple years ago. So essentially what this project is a complete slurry seal, which is essentially a new layer or coating on top of the entire trail. This is the first major kind of maintenance project that we've done outside of just spot work. You remember a couple years ago, we did a project where we went in and fixed some of the bad areas, the really bad areas of the trails. This will actually provide a new coating on the entire trail section, again, except for the section that was just completed on the Little Miami 2 years ago.
Thank you.
So Brian, what date are we talking about this work being completed or being started, I guess, for that matter?
I will ask Chris if he has a idea of when the contractor may begin work. Obviously, it is contingent upon commission's approval of the contract, but I don't know if Chris has an update on when the contractor is looking to start this.
The only thing we know is that because of the vegetation along the trail, they would like to start sooner rather than later because the vegetation has been cut back. And we don't want to have to cut it back anymore. But it's the money is available. It's just a matter of commission approval, getting our paperwork processed, and getting them on site. So we're hoping late May, early June, but That will all depend on how much the current COVID-19 situation slows down the paperwork.
Chris, I had a question on it. You said the money's available. Where's the money coming from?
$137,000 is coming from ODOT and $34,000 is coming from RPI.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Quite frankly, that's a welcome addition to our budget because if ODOT's going to step up and pay for something that they should have been paying for, that makes sense.
Yes. And one positive about this, it is a quick process. So the trails should be disrupted. Really, if the weather permits, this can all be done in 1 week, and only certain sections of the trail will be closed. But it's not going to be as disruptive as some of the last projects that shut sections of trail down for an extended period.
Okay.
Anyone else?
It's all very good news.
Mm-hmm.
Clerk, call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes.
authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Shelley Company for the 2020 PI paving project for an amount not to exceed $1,932,457.93 and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I would like Brian or Chris to, this is part of our commitment, is it not, for the $2 million annually that came out of the passage of the levy? And if you would just review what streets or projects would be involved in being repaved with this money.
Yes, Commissioner. I'll answer the first part to your question. Yes, this is part of our commitment to our citizens with the levy. This is our neighborhood street paving program. And I want to make a note that we ended up bidding Broadway separately because it was such a large project, but that is part of the neighborhood street paving program. So it's not reflected in there. And with the Broadway project, we're spending well over $3 million locally on our neighborhood streets this year. So I wanted to make that point known. Chris, if you could answer as far as the streets that this includes for this year and also some of the other work, because I know there's some utility work that goes with this as well.
Yes. So this includes paving portions of Bill Edwards Drive, Fostoria Street, Maplewood Avenue, Florence Street, Linden Avenue, Oakwood Place, and Euclid Avenue. In addition to the paving that will take place, there will be a sewer project prior to paving that takes place on Bill Edwards Drive to deal with an area of combined sewer overflows. And there will be a sewer project that takes place on Oakwood Place to upsize the sewer line that is in that section of Oakwood between Plum Street and the dead end.
Very good. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to add for commissioners, just so they know as well, if you recall in last year's program, there was a portion of the southeast section of the city around Kenwood, Nagley, Beacon, that we were prepared to pave last year. And then Columbia Gas came to us and said, oh, wait, yeah, maybe we didn't look at that close enough. And there are some issues relative to our infrastructure. And so the plan was to work with Columbia Gas. They did pay the city for temporary paving of those roadways that had been pulverized. So they do have temporary pavement on them. We originally were going to try to complete those projects in 2020 to go back and get those roadways completed. But with Columbia Gas's schedule, even before the COVID-19, we were concerned with the lack of progress that had been made at a certain point, and we did not want to get stuck that we get to the end of the paving season and we're not able to pave those roadways again because Columbia Gas has not completed their project. So Columbia Gas is utilizing 2020. They are actually out there now working to upgrade their medium pressure line in this neighborhood. And then our plan is to come back in early next year. We would have that as part of next year's paving program. So I did want you to know that we have not forgotten about the roadways in the southeast quadrant. Those will be done. They will be done sometime in the first half of 2021. But again, we did not want to take a chance that Columbia Gas did not finish or complete their project on time, which would not have allowed us to pave any roadways this year.
Is the temporary pavement holding up well enough that it can survive another year, or will there need to be some additional work done on it? Have you talked to Columbia Gas about that potential, paying for any necessary repairs?
Yeah, right now, and Chris can add into it as well. You know, I've been over on those streets here recently, and the temporary paving seems to be holding up pretty well. Obviously, there's the locations where Columbia Gas is working right now that will be disturbed. And we will continue to monitor those and patch and do what we need to keep that infrastructure in place. We believe it will last through 2020. That was part of the decision-making process when we decided to go ahead and move those roadways into 2021 to be completed, was an assessment of that temporary pavement and what, you know, kind of observed through the winter to see how it held up. And it actually held up pretty good. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything from that, from the street side.
No, we have been pleased with how well it's holding up. Obviously, this winter was friendly to us from a street maintenance / deterioration standpoint. We've been pleased with how it's holding up. So hopefully Columbia Gas can make good progress and we can get this neighborhood back together again very soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chris,
Go ahead,
go
Joyce.
ahead. Okay, you go, Rob.
Just to say, has there already been an article released or some information released to the public about the streets that we're voting on today? Or is there going to be, right after we vote today, will there be?
Right after we vote today, we plan to release an article and a new map. Val's been working on that. So we would have a press release that would state, you know, we're still moving ahead with our neighborhood street program, our commitment under the levy situation, and name the streets that we're committing to. We obviously did not want to release that yet until commission has approved the project.
I also wonder if it would be smart to highlight the Broadway project as well and the overall street that what we're paying attention to.
Yeah, we will highlight that. And then obviously North Belmont from Mitchell to Home is under construction currently as well. So we will highlight all of the roadways that are under construction this summer. One, so people know when they are traveling or traversing those roadways, why. And we'll still have the signage up there, the project signage that we added a couple years ago that talks about the source of funds and what projects going on there. But yes, we will communicate all of the roadway projects that are occurring during 2020 this year.
Thank you.
And my question, Brian, was what happened to talk about the neighborhood meeting with Columbia Gas and the city of Springfield for that area out there in the southwest quadrant? Has there been any discussion on that?
Yeah, Columbia Gas is more than willing to hold a public meeting. Their government affairs person had reached out to me once they kind of started their project to explain that. And then the middle of March happened. And as you know, public gatherings and meetings are not encouraged at this point. Columbia Gas has been putting out and pushing out information to the neighborhood as well as the community about the projects that they're working on right now. I know they've shared several things that we've put out there, information about their projects. They are open to a public meeting when we're allowed to resume public gatherings to talk about the project. Unfortunately, by the time we might reach that point, they will hopefully be at least halfway done with their project.
Thank you.
Yeah, Columbia Gas has been more than willing and welcome. Again, Columbia Gas stepped up. They did, you know, yes, there was a mistake, but they did pay the city over $150,000 to put temporary paving down on those roadways. They have started construction in those neighborhoods. If you drive out there, you will see them on a daily basis. So even with the COVID-19, they're still at least out there trying to move the project forward. And they, again, have reached out and are more than willing to have a public meeting. We're just in a position right now where public meetings are discouraged.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Dr. Estroff,
Yes,
Mr. Rue,
Yes,
Mr. Copeland,
Yes,
confirming and approving adoption of a revised citizen participation plan and declaring an emergency therein.
so moved.
second.
questions? Go ahead.
I was wondering if Brian might review the revisions we've made to this.
Yes, while I'm pulling up Shannon's video, the next two items, so confirming and approving the adoption of the revised citizen participation plan, as well as amending the next ordinance related to our consolidated action plan with HUD, all relates to CARES Act funding that was received by the city of Springfield as adopted at the federal level. So Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about both items?
Sure. So as Brian indicated, the third amendment to the CARES Act resulted in additional CDBG COVID funding, as well as emergency solution grant COVID funding. With that, we did need to amend our consolidated plan and action plan that you authorized just about 45 days ago. And a part of that amendment required citizen participation and public comment. Typically, CDBG regulations require 30 days for public comment, but as a function of the CARES Act legislation, Congress authorized local governments and state governments to run a 5-day public comment period. That public comment period began last Wednesday and concluded last night. We did receive one comment that did not substantially change the legislation presented to you, but the data will be incorporated in the narrative of the plan. Because our citizen participation plan requires a 30-day public comment period, we need to confirm and approve this particular CARES Act change to the 5-day. Moving forward, outside of COVID-19, we would keep our typical 30-day citizen participation. For the next piece of legislation following this, because they really are sister pieces, we are amending the consolidated plan, as I indicated, to include $1.16 million of COVID-related CDBG activity, as well as $560,000 of emergency solution grant activity. We do anticipate over the coming weeks or months an additional amendment to this plan, just as a heads up, because the legislation and regulations are not fully developed from Congress and the agencies at this point in time. But it is critical for us to make this amendment this time so that we can begin the process of securing the funding. So the second amendment that you will see will be much more specific on our proposed application of funding. This amendment essentially puts money into buckets. Those buckets for COVID-related expenses are associated with public service, public facilities, special economic development, and administration reimbursement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon.
And remind us about what the additional, how much the additional money is.
So our typical allocation was $1.8 million, and this will add an additional $1.6 million to the CDBG administration funds. But the additional dollars have to be directly associated with preparing for, responding to, and preventing the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
yes,
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estroff,
Yes,
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Mr. Copeland.
Yes,
Amending ordinance number 2098, which authorized the submission of the 2020-2024 consolidated plan and 2020 action plan of the city of Springfield, Ohio to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to modify the plans to include funding from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, authorizing the city manager, finance director, law director, and community development director to do all things they deem necessary to implement, operate, and administer the city's community development block grant program, emergency solutions grant program, home program, community development block grant coronavirus program, and emergency solutions grant coronavirus program, and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Questions or comments from the committee? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrada,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Per notification from the Ohio Department of Liquor Control of a request to transfer a liquor permit from SDYA LLC, doing business as Main Stop Food Mart, 637 West Main Street, Springfield, Ohio, 45504, to Diza Investments LLC, 637 West Main Street, Springfield, Ohio. The city manager recommends that a hearing request be filed to address concerns pertaining to this permit.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I had just the concerns from what our previous positions have been on these, that anytime that it was going to be something that could be handled locally, that we were not going to ask for that. And that the reason that is we didn't want to appear that we were going to object on everything, and it went well for several years. And again, I understand the public safety, situation that we have here with the fire department. However, I think that can be handled locally before a C of O is granted to this new business. That's going to be a new business. It's not the same owner, from what I've been told by the city manager. And I think we need to be careful when we object, because we don't want to become the appearance of that we're just complaining to complain. And I think that there's a big delay now with regards to these public hearings, because they don't have public meetings either in the state. So I think we need to be careful, not objecting to this. I just want some clarification as to what we're going to be objecting to and what we're not going to be objecting to, because I'm a little bit confused.
Understood. Specifically on this item, Commissioner, fire tried to make entry to do their inspection as related to the liquor permit. They found the building padlocked. They left their normal notification that they were trying to make entry related to this request. And they've also reached out and tried to make contact and communicate with the owner itself. And it has not been resolved where the owner has actually allowed either fire or building inspections into the building. So it's hard to say, specifically if those things can't, the building can be addressed through the C of O process or not, because again, the building has been shut down for a little bit of time, and having access for both fire and building is important, and has been important in the past on these liquor permits. And so if the owner, before a hearing is actually held, if the owner allows access, and we do observe that we can deal with the things through the C of O, there may not be any issues, and a C of O can be issued for the property. It's the fact that we have not been able to gain entry at this point in time. If the owner makes communication and contact with fire, and fire and building can get in there and do their inspection, most likely this would result in us requesting to the liquor control not to hold a hearing and to proceed with the liquor permit. So that's the issue specifically on this one. I'll just add to commission, I've had a conversation with Joe Allen, and Joe Allen is going to be looking at our policy and procedures on how we address and look at these liquor permits. Again, we don't want to cause undue delay as it relates to these permits. We know, one, they're very competitive to get. And also with the current delays with the COVID-19, and I would imagine that'll be ongoing even after we come out of COVID-19 as they try to play catch up at the state. We don't want to cause any further delays for local businesses. So Joe Allen's going to be reviewing those policies and procedures on how we move forward in the future on these liquor permits.
Anybody else?
I had a question, Brian, and maybe it's a question for our police chief. I was unclear on the hours of operation. I believe the report from Captain Zawada read open from 1,000 hours until the hours to permit allows alcohol to be sold. So I was unclear on the hours of operation.
Yeah, I will ask Chief Graff if he wants to answer that specifically. Lee? Let's see if he pulls up. I don't know if he's having difficulties on his side. So specifically, I think what he's trying to say, they will be open from 10 o'clock until the hours the permit allows alcohol to be sold from. Typically, the permits cap or limits the hours of operation that liquor can be sold. I don't have the information specifically in front of me to be able to answer what that is to as it relates to this specific permit. But typically it'll set a cutoff at 11 p.m. or 12 p.m., 1 p.m., or 1 a.m., 12 a.m., depending on the specific permit.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
The next item has been added to the agenda, authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement for real estate for the purchase of certain real property located at 1841 Clifton Avenue from Park Hill Center LTD for an amount not to exceed $88,000, authorizing the city manager, law director, and the director of finance to perform all acts and execute all documents they consider necessary to fulfill the city's obligations under said purchase agreement and to comply with all relevant local, state, and federal legal requirements and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I was wondering if Brian might comment on exactly where this is. I know we have the address, but why are we interested in this piece of real estate?
Yeah, specifically, this property is just south of the existing Kroger on South Limestone Street. This is a building owned by a local property owner. It is currently being utilized as a furniture repair shop, but it's a rundown building. It's a tired building. And as we look at redevelopment opportunities for the former Kroger site there on South Limestone, we believe that this building is a critical piece, specifically the property will be a critical piece as we try to develop that redevelopment plan for the former Kroger location. Tom, I pulled Tom Franzen up if he wants to speak specifically to this property and the purchase agreement. But Tom has been working this project and again, has kind of taken the lead on the overall Kroger redevelopment strategy. Tom?
I think you articulated the reason it's important to us just from a redevelopment potential of that shopping center there. We felt that it was key, wanted to get control of the property, to remove the blighting influence as well as to make way for some potential infill, depending on what the ultimate strategy is for that lot. But so that was the rationale for trying to get control of the property. As Brian alluded, we continue to work with developers, interested investors, stakeholders, our partners at the county and chamber, and private stakeholders as well, to kind of lay the groundwork for a strategy for the redevelopment of that site itself, and maybe some of the surrounding area. It's our hope to continue with, we've been meeting virtually with stakeholders and trying to plan for a larger kind of community update, stakeholder update that got stymied a little bit, obviously, by the current business practices, but staff's trying to work on a solution that in May timeframe we'll try and do, if we're still needing to follow the current business practices, which we assume we will. We'll try and host something of a community forum or update to do that. So stakeholder input is critical for this project, and we'll continue to seek that. But I think the idea is to have an overall strategy recommendation to commission by midsummer, I think would be fair to say, Brian.
Yes.
Tom, I don't know where you are, but you need to tell those people they shouldn't all be there.
I was happy to finally be able to use this. The Springfield Convention Visitors Bureau put those up on Facebook for people to download to use as their backdrop on Zoom. So that is obviously the Springfield Arts Festival. And wouldn't it be nice to be there today?
You mean to be allowed to be there today?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad to hear that things are continuing to move forward in terms of South Limestone. I think the sooner, given all the restraints, the sooner we can have a community update, the better. I just want to applaud you for continuing to pursue this, even in the time that the restrictions that we have to operate under. But that has to be an essential step forward to deal with the food desert in the South End. It's just so important for our community.
I totally agree.
Yeah, we completely agree with that. And I just want to commend staff, because again, things are different right now, but our staff in community development, the city manager's office, our partners at the county chamber, we've continued to move this project forward even during these challenging times. And again, as Tom alluded, we are working to come up with a strategy solution in case we can't do a large public gathering or forum, that we can still communicate and take stakeholder input on the next steps of this redevelopment opportunity.
I just have one question, so maybe I missed it. Are the groups still at least meeting on Zoom or corresponding by telephone?
So the focus groups that you're referring to, we have not held any meetings with them outside of the economic development group. Held one meeting right before this COVID-19 crisis took hold and really canceled all public gatherings. And so we have not held any type of Zoom communication. We've talked about that. We think it can be challenging. As you know, just even 15, 20 people on a Zoom call can be overwhelming, and you lose really what you're trying to capture is the individual's strategic thoughts and comments. And so we're talking with our partners about the best way, one, to communicate, but then also to gather that input. And as Tom said, we would hope to have something in May, whether it's a live discussion or if it's some alternative method of communicating and working with our stakeholders. We plan to do that in May.
I just wanted to make sure that the community was not left out, even though the city and our partners are continuing to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, totally understand that. And we agree with that. And even the stakeholders that we have been working with understand the importance of community involvement on this project.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. That concludes our agenda. Are there other items to come before us from commissioners?
I have a couple questions for Brian. Brian, I was wondering, as you did at the last meeting, if you could give us an update on the departments across the city and the services being provided by our staff.
Yes, certainly. So I'm relatively pleased to report. So right now in our fire division, we currently do not have any of our firefighters under quarantine. I think that's great news. Again, as I stated, we had up to 9 at one point in time that were under quarantine. So I think it's a testament to our members of the fire division, both our men and women of the fire division, the way that they're utilizing their PPE on their calls, and just how they're going about their business and doing and performing their job. So I commend them for that, and their business as usual, other than obviously some different policies and procedures that are in place to protect them and to protect members of our community. So we're excited about that. On the police side, we were holding, as you know, after the last meeting, we had several officers and one service clerk that went under quarantine. I'm glad to say, as of pretty quickly after that meeting, all of the police officers were off of quarantine as test results started to come back much quicker. The PSC, the police service clerk that was under quarantine, is back to full duty as well. We do have one officer that, as of yesterday, was informed that they need to go on quarantine. So they are currently on quarantine. And we hope to have test results back again. Test results have seemed to pick up pace in terms of getting those results back, especially when it involves a first responder. So we would hope even by the end of today, we might have test results back on that individual that they were able to help specifically in this case. On the dispatch side, we had one under quarantine at one point. That person is back to full duty. So we are actually back to full operations as far as nobody on quarantine. We also actually were able to bring on, during this time, 4 new dispatchers. One is actually a retired police officer for us. And so he was able to start a few weeks ago and is up to speed pretty quickly and already in the center itself. And then we brought 3 additional on last week that will help us and keep our numbers stable in dispatch, because again, that is critical. And they're working around the clock to take the calls from our community, from our citizens. So from a first responder, fire, police, and dispatch, we are almost, except for that one individual, at full staffing and continue to operate and serve our community. So I'm glad to be able to report that to you today. As far as some of our other departments are concerned, community development continues the great work that they do for our community and our neighborhoods. It's just a little bit different. Our code enforcement officers are out there in the neighborhoods, but they stick to their cars. Fortunately for them, that it's a position that they can kind of isolate themselves, but still be serving the community. I'm proud to say our building regulations division, you may know, about 18 months ago, they started to transition to electronic permitting, electronic plan review. First started on the commercial side and now have incorporated on the residential side as well. And what better timing to be able to be digital and electronic than right now. And they've actually kind of served as a case model for other communities. So while construction does still continue in Springfield because of our capabilities from our building regulations division, other communities have had to shutter their inspection services and their plan review as they try to get up to speed on specifically the plan review and the inspection process digitally, electronically. And so they have been reaching out to our building folks to talk with them for best practices. So I'm glad to say that we're ahead of the curve of many communities as it relates to that, and they've been doing a great job. Obviously, as Shannon mentioned, there's been a lot of work on the development program side as new funding streams come in and trying to pair through the dollars that come into our community. And so they've been working tirelessly to figure that out and how we can maximize that for our community itself. Personnel continues to serve the organization well. As I said, we've just recently hired the additional dispatchers. We also conducted and completed interviews for fire as well. We were under our minimum manning, and we were able to bring it back up to our minimum manning levels of 127 and making offers to 8 different firefighters over the course of this past week. So personnel continues to assist and provide a role to our community and to our organization specifically. Finance, and Mark will talk a little bit about that, I think, to another question you might have related to the budget, but they continue to work to analyze on a daily basis our revenue as well as our expenditures, but also keeping the organization functioning. As you know, they serve as the lifeline for much in our organization. In finance department, they have been, as you know, we're working remotely, and IT has stepped up a big way to allow our organization. And then our service department, they're still responding to they're mowing as well, taking care of that, because we don't want to create another community by ignoring specifically the abandoned lots that exist in our community that we took on several years ago in mowing. So they've been performing that the last couple weeks. As you know, mowing season is in full swing, and so they've been out there attacking that. And both treatment plants obviously remain operational, and their focus is obviously keeping the water running and then having a place for that water to go at the end of the day as well. And so both treatment plants can continue to operate at a high level. Unfortunately, there we have not had any issues of individuals needing to be on quarantine. Chris Moore put a great plan of action in place as it related to the treatment plants. And I think that's been working great to be able to protect and preserve those individuals as well, as they operate a key source to our community and our water supply. And then again, also on the wastewater treatment side. So again, I'm proud of all of our departments and divisions. They've stepped up to the challenges. They've adapted in their jobs to the needs and continue to serve the community on a daily basis. So just proud to be a part of the organization and a part of a great team. I will address too, we are working as a staff on what a reopening strategy looks like for us as an organization. As you know, Governor DeWine is currently developing that strategy at the state level. And so we at the local level are obviously paying mind to what the state is doing. The federal government also put out some guidelines, some phases. And so we've taken a look at that and incorporating on how we look at reopening our operations more fully and kind of back to somewhat normal. I don't think there'll ever be a true normal here for a good period of time, but we are looking at how we can, one, protect our employees while at the same time continuing to serve the public in a more normal operating capacity. I will say to you, I think it's going to be fluid. It's got to be flexible, even at the state level. You heard yesterday, if you listened to Governor DeWine's press conference, Ohio actually experienced the largest uptick in number of cases over the weekend. And so just as we're starting to talk about an opening strategy, we're experiencing some of the larger numbers of those that are experiencing the COVID-19. And so we're going to continue to listen to what the state is doing and what they're recommending, but it's going to be an incremental process. It's not going to be a flip of the switch that we're just back to normal operations. We're going to be smart about this because again, it's important to protect our employees. It's important to protect our community and our citizens while we also continue to serve our community and our citizens. So it's going to be an incremental process. We're putting plans in place. We hope to have those plans more fully developed here over the next week and a half. And then we'll be much in line with kind of that May 1st date when the governor is starting to look at opening Ohio back up to a degree.
Thank you for all of that. I really appreciate it. But I am also interested in the question of where we are financially, because as a member of the mayor's group, I know that especially our larger cities, Cincinnati has been a key of this, probably the biggest. They're cutting people dramatically because they don't have revenue. So how are we doing in terms of revenue, and where do we think we stand on our being able to keep our present staffing?
Yep, and I'll have Mark kind of speak to the revenue side and the expense side, but go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I'd be happy to jump in here and talk a little bit about that. We are blessed from the standpoint that the citizens provided us with the additional 0.4% back in 2000, starting back in 2017. One of our commitments, I think during, or not think, but one of our commitments during that levy campaign was that we would rebuild our so-called rainy day fund. We did that, and that's going to be quite helpful to us going forward. So at this point, we are somewhat in a, obviously a fluid situation about how long are we going to have to be in this modified operations phase. But Brian and I have taken a multi-pronged and action-oriented approach to this. We've identified over $1 million worth of permanent improvement dollars that we can defer until some later date when our revenues improve. And we are also taking steps to look at all of the open positions that are currently unfilled within the city and trying to determine whether we truly need to fill them right at this point in time. So we are going to develop a savings strategy related to that. We are also seeking all of the potential relief opportunities that we can, whether that be the refund from the PWC, whether that be some COVID dollars available through FEMA. We're doing that. Also, we've done I think a good job of modifying our operations. We take care of the daily essentials for folks, but we've looked at ways to cut costs by deferring some things that would be nice to do, but we can wait. And to that end, this morning's unencumbered cash balance was $15 million. So that positions us at least for the near term to weather the storm, shall we say.
So how much is revenue down?
Revenue is down about 12% based on what I've seen in the most recent withholdings that come in. I expect it to drop a little bit further than that as we go forward. I was pleasantly surprised that it was only down that much. We have 2 big days when the biweekly withholders submit their withholding dollars, and that would have been the 3rd of April and here on the 18th. And those numbers were higher than I had anticipated. So
hey, that's good news.
That is good news.
So many of our larger employers are still up and running.
It's a mixed bag. I believe many of them that are associated with the automotive industry are shut down, but some of our largest employers include government, which we are part of, and then hospitals, which the Springfield Regional is, while it's not at full staffing at this point, is still up and running. So there are bright spots there. Tom and Logan Cobbs are doing a business survey to get a better handle on just who is open and who is not, and we'll have the results of that soon. So I think we're trying to be as proactive as we can, but not having a knee-jerk reaction to the concerns here.
Knowing that nobody's crystal ball can really look ahead with any certainty, at this point in time, given what you know about our status financially, are you anticipating any furlough or layoff of city employees?
We have we are not there at this point.
Good. Good. I understand about leaving unfilled positions vacant. I think that makes sense to evaluate each of those in terms of the absolute need to fill it. That's fine, but that's good news. And I just want to thank all of the city employees for keeping us healthy, safe, secure, and for keeping the city running. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, that's primarily why I was raising this question, because I was concerned that all these other cities are making major cuts in their workforce, and I'm glad that our revenue is still holding on reasonably well, and I hope we can continue to provide the services that people expect. And I agree with you. Our workers are out there doing their work, even when there may be a little bit of risk in certain areas, certainly, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, Warren, I'll just touch base on or add on to what Mark said, but also to your comment about larger cities. There are a lot of articles floating around that this is impacting more quickly the larger cities, and a lot of that is related to some of the larger event venues and large scale operations that they see in those communities, that they are not seeing any of that revenue currently. And so that's impacting the Cincinnati's. You can't take for granted, at this point, there had been about a month in the baseball season, and they're losing a lot of revenue that they would see benefit from not only, Reds games, but concerts and other sorts of venues that are generating a lot of not just sales tax, but also income tax revenue that they're feeling a loss on right now. And so they have indicated that that has been a struggle for them. Also, if you remember, the way the casino revenues were set up is the larger cities would receive some direct allocation outside of just the counties. We do not receive any casino money revenue. That goes to the county here. And so we're not seeing a loss in that, whereas the Cincinnati, the Columbus, the Clevelands, they're feeling that loss as well on top of the income tax loss because casinos are not currently operating in the state of Ohio. And so that has also impacted to a major degree those larger cities as well. So we're fortunate in that regard that we did not have those line items relative to our budget, but it is still, the internationals, the Topres, some of the automotive industry specifically was already kind of on a dip, and this just perpetuated that because they've now pretty much shut down to a degree. But we do have a lot of companies that are still operating. The Silfexes and so forth are still business as usual. And some of our companies were able to take advantage of the PPP program, the payroll protection program at the federal level that they're trying to authorize additional dollars for. And that at least keeps, as long as they commit 75% of that money to payroll, they do not have to, that ends up being a forgivable loan. And so that, I think, is helping stem the tide a little bit too for some of the organizations that have had to shut their doors. They're still able to at least keep their employees paid.
Well, I sincerely appreciate, Brian, what you and Mark and others are continuing to do to keep an eye on that financial bottom line. I appreciate the work that takes across the organization to keep us financially healthy during this time of the crisis.
Well, we will do our best to continue on that road. It'll, I'm sure, will change. We hope it is shorter lived rather than longer lived, but we will adjust as time moves forward here.
Well, and as you said, Mark, thank goodness the people of this city passed that temporary bump in the income tax that allows us to be in the position we are financially right now. Without that, we would have been in deep trouble a long time ago.
That's correct.
Yeah, I agree on all counts, and I really am interested in you keeping track of this very closely in the months ahead. you know, the organizations I belong to related to mayors are really pressing federal government in particular for some help because the money that went out so far, there's only one city in Ohio that got any money. So you know, I'm trying to keep track of this and play a role if possible in getting some help. So keep us informed.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and we appreciate that, Warren. And I know the mayor's group as well as OML has submitted letters to our legislators in Washington encouraging just that, because don't let me be remiss in saying that part of this plan is that we're able to seek some reimbursement through FEMA, but through some other direct dollars and allocations from the federal level to help offset the losses that we will experience as well. So those are part of the emergency proclamation was to allow me specifically, but working with my different departments and divisions to pursue all state and federal reimbursement eligibility programs related to COVID-19. And that's going to be a critical piece of keeping not only businesses in our community, but us as an organization continuing to operate and serve the community. So thank you.
Just so everyone knows, I did write letters to both senators and our member of Congress, encouraging them to think about us when they're voting on spending money for helping people. So
Thank you.
see what happens. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
I think you left us a little while ago.
okay. Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank all of you.